White cake? Yeah, got a beautiful white cake recipe. Today, I'm going to be fulfilling a request for one of my viewers, and this is the viewer's name, Sherry here. Thank you for writing in. Thank you for asking me to do this recipe for you. Sherry here wrote in and asked, hey, would you please do a recipe for a white cake? And so I said, yes, I'll do one. It'll take me some time, but I will do one. So here it is. Sherry, this is your cake recipe. This is a white cake, and it's got a beautiful buttercream frosting recipe to go with it. Folks, this isn't a real difficult one, and it's a really fun one to make. You get to do a couple of different processes and combine them and see some very interesting results for a cake. This fantastic ingredients, delicious cake when it comes out, and you're going to be surprised just how tasty this is. So, come over this way. We're going to take a look at these ingredients and get busy making a fantastic white cake. Oh, and by the way, this makes for a good wedding cake in case you're wondering. Yeah. So the ingredients I'm going to be using for my white cake today, well, a lot of white ingredients, but some of them aren't really that white, like the vanilla. So anyway, this being a vanilla cake, I'm going to be using vanilla. I'm going to be using eggs, but only the whites, just using egg whites. Got some flour back here. This is a cake flour, and it's important that you use a cake flour on this recipe. And this is why. Cake flour has less gluten, and with less gluten, you're going to have a softer, more light crumb kind of cake. In other words, it's less doughy. Over here, we've got some milk, sugar, butter, salt, and baking powder, and that gives us our fantastic tasting cake. Over here I got some butter and some powdered sugar, and these are for the purpose of our frosting, and it's going to be a delicious one. The frosting, going to flavor it with the vanilla the same way we do the cake. That way we have just a beautiful vanilla cake. It's delicious, and this is a fantastic recipe. Now folks, we're going to be making a foam cake today. The reason I have two mixers out here was to kind of demonstrate the fact that this is done in two separate processes. We have this process over here that creates a stiff foam that makes the cake light and airy. And we have this process over here that makes kind of just regular cake batter. And then those two processes get folded into one another to create this wonderful light fluffy cake. So what I've got to do is separate all 6 eggs. No yolks in this, it's just whites. Separate them one at a time into one bowl. If you get any shells or anything in it that way, you can just pick them out and then throw them into the bowl you're going to mix in. One word of advice though, any fat whatsoever on this or in the bowl is going to result in these not fluffing up the way they're supposed to. They should foam up quickly in a matter of just a couple of minutes. And this right here is the whisk that we're going to use. That has to also be just spotlessly clean. If there's any, let's say, residual film that's left over from the butter of doing, let's say, buttercream, this will cause this to not rise the way it needs to be. In other words, it won't fluff up and get stiff the way it should be, because fat messes that up for eggs, okay? Messes it up for the protein that we're trying to work with. So we're going to separate these. Over here, I'm going to take my baking powder and salt, and I'm going to sift them with the flour to make it light and airy. And yes, again, this has to be sifted. I have now sifted together my dry ingredients. I usually use a little measuring cup to make it easy to get my dry ingredients into the bowl when it comes time. Right now, the time is to cream the butter I have in here. It's come to room temperature, and I'm going to run my paddle that I have on this. This is a beater paddle. I'm going to run that at a medium speed, and I'm going to cream this butter until it becomes light and fluffy. I want the butter to be double the bulk that I start with, and I want the color to be almost white. All right. After all, this is white cake. The butter's got yellow in it. All right. So we got to work with that issue. Plus, this is an important thing. This step beats air into the fat itself, and that retains that air until it is baked. And at that point, those air pockets that have been beat into the fat start to expand and open up and make that light, fluffy cake. That's one of the things that makes good cake. The other one is going to be the fact that we beat our egg whites until they're stiff and then fold that into this batter. And another thing that's going to make this light and fluffy is the fact that we put baking powder in this. So we're leavening the cake 3 different ways, essentially. All right, that's what we're doing. 2 mechanical forms and 1 chemical form. Let's get on with making this. I'm going to cream in the sugar, and once that has happened, then I'll start working in my dry and my milk, and I'll go ahead and put in the vanilla at that point. You can put the vanilla in there at any point after the sugar has been fully incorporated. The egg whites, beat those. They don't have to be done in a separate beater, but make sure it's clean of all fat. Beat the egg whites until they are stiff. You're going to need that way. That only takes a short moment. I have my other mixer, and I'm fortunate to have 2, but I have it covered right now for the sole purpose of keeping any stray fat from getting in there that would taint the results of what I'm trying to do. There we go. Get that locked down, get it started. The batter's all combined. I went ahead and beat the butter until it was doubled in bulk and it was almost white, and then worked in the sugar slowly, then worked in the other ingredients slowly, and here we are. We have this gorgeous batter. Now I need to make my egg whites light, fluffy, and stiff, and fold the 2 mixtures together. I have both of my mixtures here. I've got my beaten egg white, and I have my batter back here. I'm going to fold the 2 together, and we're going to get them in the pans and start baking them. You need that oven at 350 degrees. So go ahead, get it turned on and preheating now. I'm going to get this mixed. So I have my 3 cakes ready for the oven. It's at 350 degrees. And I'm going to check these in 20 minutes, folks. So get them baked up. Come on. These 2 are already out of the oven. They were on the upper rack. There's 1 more left in there. It's got another 2 minutes left. It's getting browned off on top. And I did the toothpick test. These came out nice. That one that wasn't quite browned yet, the lower rack, still needed a couple of more minutes, and it was a little bit wet on the toothpick. And that's of course how we test. Just take your toothpick, push it straight into the top of your cake, pull it back out, and it either comes out with wet batter on it or it does not. And so this one did not. This cake's already been tested. What's coming out will be tested at that time. Well, we've baked up our little cakes, and one of them that I have here is a little lighter in color than the rest of them, and that's not a problem. I do have buttercream that needs to be made. I've got this beautiful butter here. Again, we're going to cream this until it goes from that yellow color to a nice white color. And then I'm going to put my sifted sugar down into this. Make sure you sift your sugar. That's a real important part of making a good buttercream. And the other thing is making sure you get that butter fat light and fluffy enough. Again, this is about processing the fat. You can whip a lot of air into fat, and you need to do so. For this, I'm going to use a whisk. The reason I didn't use a whisk on the cake was because the cake needed the batter folded and gently treated after it had been, after the butter had been worked. So I like to use the paddle for that. It's a little more gentle. This, I can just go ahead and work the air right into it with one of these. Well, I've got the butter that's getting creamed right now. As soon as that doubles in bulk and turns a nice and light color, I'll be working in my sifted sugar. Once the sifted sugar is in there, then I put in my vanilla. Now, a very simple recipe, folks. This is a pound of butter, pound of sugar, and a teaspoon of vanilla, and you've got buttercream. Just remember the process of what I'm doing here, which is creaming that fat, working air into it. This is the most important part. And if you don't do this well, you won't have good buttercream. I have my cake rounds, and I have something to put them on. I recommend you try to find some of these. These are really handy. They make these for pizza and for cakes. They sell them at restaurant supplies. And they also come in decorator types. They make them with different color of metallic finishes like gold or silver or whatever for you to build your cake onto. And they're built just for that. I like to use this plain white one because it's inexpensive and it's a great way to teach on. Now when I want to build a cake, I put a little buttercream right in the middle right here, and it just keeps that cake from sliding around on this. This we keep from sliding around on the turntable with a little bit of tape. A little bit of masking tape is all it takes to hold this in place in 3 spots. After that, I'm going to be covering each one of these with buttercream and then doing the sides. Now these came out good and flat. They don't really need any cutting, okay? They are quite level as they are. A little bit higher here, little dark edges, that's not a problem, okay? Now if you are really picky and you can't have any brown in your white cake, then go ahead and cut that top off with the edge. And that's just a matter of, you know, take the knife, run it sideways while spinning your cake in a circle, all right? Keep it as simple as that. Now, get this thing assembled. It's buttercream in between, then we're going to do it on top and around the sides, and that should be enough buttercream to do the entire cake. All things are going quite well. I'm just getting this buttercream spread across here, and as soon as I get this top layer done and smoothed out, I want to bring it up the sides, and we are finished. It's just that simple. All right, keep working yours out layer by layer. It's not a tough cake to do, and it has a great flavor when you're done. Before we jump into the quantity of all of the ingredients, I wanted to mention to you, a lot of my recipes are now going to be done in weight measurements, and this is something you really need to consider. Most professional chefs are doing their recipes this way now. Most of the recipes coming out of Europe are already being done this way. It makes more sense, and I'll explain it. We're doing weight measurements, and we're doing them in grams, and of course that can be converted, you know, to American units, you know, the SAE system, but we don't need to do that. The grams are on all scales, and they're very accurate, okay? And I'm doing that on purpose because you get more accurate, consistent results time after time after time making the same cake. Where if you use volume measurements, that can vary with each and every cake you make, and that's because 2 different kinds of flour are going to weigh differently, and 2 different kinds of flour may measure differently, and so you want to get things consistent. So by having a single weight, that gives you that consistency where the measuring cup does not, because it can vary from batch to batch. Also the type of flour that's used, whether you're using, let's say, an all-purpose or maybe a cake flour, and in this case we're using a cake flour. That does make a difference. So you're going to see all of my recipes like I do here. This is my work from this last week. When I was developing this recipe, I wanted to do my conversions after I had developed it, and that's what I had done here. And it's just a matter of I weigh things out as I go, and then there's my converted recipe. So if you're ever looking to do your own, this is how it's done. This is a really cool recipe. Let's take a look at the ingredients that we're using and how much of each, so that you have a good recipe to use. The quantity of the ingredients that we have used today, let's start back here. This is cake flour, in other words, a low gluten flour. And of that one, we used 320 grams. Our sugar over here, it's the same weight, folks. That's 320 grams of sugar. And 1 cup of milk. Now, if you want to look at it this way, that would be like, I think it's 248 milliliters, 250 you might as well say, just round it up. A splash isn't going to make any difference. So 250 milliliters on the milk. We have 6 eggs. We're going to be using the whites of those, no yolks. On the vanilla, I used 2 teaspoons of that, and that of course equates to 4 milliliters of vanilla. Down here I've got baking powder, and on that baking powder I used basically 1 tablespoon on that, but a tablespoon of baking powder really weighs out to about 13 grams. All right, and on this one here I used a tiny amount of salt, and my salt there, that's only about 2 grams or 2 milliliters of salt, half a teaspoon is what that is. And then 1 stick of butter, which is 113 grams of butter, which is 1/4 of a pound, all right, right there. Easy enough, fantastic recipe. When it comes to the frosting, we started with a pound of butter, and to it we put 1 pound of sugar and flavored it up with just a little bit of vanilla, as you saw. And that makes a fantastic combination. A beautiful white cake. Let's take a look at this darling cake. It's worth your time. Folks, there it is. It is all finished up. Very simple to do. It doesn't take a lot of work to make a little white cake like this. And this can be decorated out however you want. At this point, you've got the equivalent of a crumb coat and all of your center coats all done. And you could put this into refrigeration just long enough to firm up the buttercream and then start piping on any decoration you'd like. I'm just going to put it under glass. We're going to dish it up and have a wonderful white cake just like that. Our cake, beautiful, but we need to look at the inside, right? Isn't that what you're waiting for, huh? Me too. I've been waiting for this all day. Very nice. I'm going to cut right here. Pull him right out, down to the plate, and gently off. There we go. If you're looking for that perfect white cake, you know that really soft cake that's really moist and has got that buttercream that just melts in your mouth. It's so smooth and soft. This is it. This is that recipe. All right, folks, thank you very much for watching this. Goodness. Please take a look at my channel. That is Texas Cooking Today. In addition, if you would look right under this video in that description box, you're going to see some links. One of them is to my website. That's S.A.Trotter.com. S.A.Trotter Arts LLC. That is my company, and that's what I'm doing here. This is Texas Cooking Today is just a project of. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching. Check out my website, and please enjoy your white cake. This is a good one.